welcome back to Enlighten Up for our third episode called Spiritual Frauds, Discernment, and our good old friend, the ego. This is a big topic for any area of life, but in today's episode, we share some examples of how the ego can get in the way of spirituality and why it's so important to strengthen your own inner discernment muscle. As many begin down their spiritual path, there's often a belief that everything is going to be roses and rainbows, but it couldn't be further from the truth. Like everything else in this world, there are going to be bumps along the way when you're learning something new. So we're going to share some personal experiences as well as some tips we learned along the way to help us discern truth. So let's jump in and hear what we had to say. Today, you are listening to your co-hosts, Lisa Watson, Michael Ronayne, and myself, Nicole Frolic. How are you both doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm good. Michael, how are you?
Oh, just peachy.
Your enthusiasm every show is just over the top. It just makes me so excited.
No, I'm the element. When you bring it in, you guys need me for my charming smile.
We know you'll warm up, Michael. Once you get rolling, I have no worries.
Yeah, once we get you on a rant, there's no stopping you.
That is true.
He's starting to giggle already just at the thought of a rant.
I love the word rant. It gets me jacked up.
Yeah, it does. So, what through these Michael, we're going to start with you since you are in such a good mood right now.
No, yeah. I just want to hear you say what a few more times.
Well, you tell us what defines spirituality
like
fraud.
All the fraud that's out there? Oh my goodness. This is why I have a hard time listening to you both sometimes, because I just chalk it up to, there's another load of BS coming my way. But I'm not saying that about you necessarily, but like my point is like I get so skeptical on so many things, because I would imagine of all the, I don't like the word fraud. I just like it's just very misdirection, miscommunication of people that are trying to say good messages versus very good communication of people that are trying to say bad messages. Does that make sense?
Okay.
Yeah, but there are a lot of, charlatans out there. There are people.
Yeah. I mean, like you look at all the, before the show, we were talking about like the different things, but like even you just take the idea of just a cult. A cult usually starts with someone who's very dynamic, very great at speaking, convincing, and eventually manipulating. So, I mean, there's just a lot of that out there in different facets.
And, but not just in spirituality. I think the important thing to know is that it's in everything. Doctors, lawyers, salesmen, everyone. You have to be careful and use discernment, no matter who you're dealing with in what area. Especially when you're seeking help. You're seeking help.
And discernment is I always look at it as like a mental muscle. Like it's just like something that's going to hopefully get stronger as you live longer. But because when you're a kid, you kind of believe everything, and then you just start to chip away on the things that you believe because it just becomes BS after a while or things like that.
And how can you know the difference between effective methods or manipulation? Are you being manipulated, or is this for real? Even when you go to your family practitioner and they just, whip out their little prescription pad and tell you to, go buy this. Is that truth?
Yeah.
Is that really what's needed, or are they just making money from the pharmaceutical companies,
Well, I think especially with the industry of spirituality, that many people have this belief or idea that as soon as they start to become more spiritual, that everything's going to get better and better and better, and they're just going to come across more enlightened people, and it's going to all be blissful and happy. But that's not the case, because as you start to take the travel down the path of spirituality, you encounter a lot of new stuff that you weren't aware of, and there are there are people out there who prey on, especially newcomers to the spiritual journey. And I think, like, I know, Michael, that's a big thing for you, and what's kind of holding you back from going further down this path.
This rabbit hole? Sure.
Yeah, this rabbit hole.
And it's definitely new. You're in, new waters, so to speak, with some of the things that you're going to come up against, things that, different types of people that you've never dealt with, different situations, even different vocabulary. You may not be familiar with what some of these people are talking about. So it's easy for them to manipulate.
So I think one of the biggest challenges in our current life with the things that we have out there, in my opinion, one of the number one reasons why I'm skeptical is because of many things, is because really the internet and the way the internet has kind of unmasked a whole bunch of crap, but also how the internet shows, like, you'll watch a video and say, oh, I don't believe it, it's fake. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
No, I mean, like, this is really, like, I always wondered in my life, why did Jesus show up 2,000 years ago when there's no cameras around versus now? And now I get it, because we wouldn't believe Jesus would be walking on water on a camera right now. We wouldn't believe it. We wouldn't believe any of that. Like, I used to be fascinated when I was young with those magic shows where they showed you actually how they did it. Do you guys remember that? Like the dude with the mask was revealing the secrets of the magic industry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that really showed me, like, oh my goodness, you can't really believe your own eyes. You can't believe your own eyes. And that's one huge sense that I relied on. Okay, well, if you can't believe your own eyes, you also can't perhaps believe your own ears and et cetera. So when I listen to people, talk in spiritual ways, and this is why I love you both. I'm good friends with you too. But like, if I didn't know you guys, I think you guys both were crackpots. Like, whatever, get out of my way. But because
that's compliment I've had all day.
Because of my relationship, especially with Nicole, since I've known her for 9 years now, and then all of a sudden she just went total crackpot on me these last year.
Off the deep end.
Yeah, off the deep end. I'm like going, what's going on over there in that side of the pool? So that's just my quick spiel.
Well, I think that, you made funny when you were talking about, like, you can't believe your own eyes, you can't believe your own ears. I mean, I think that's just the difference too between relying on your discernment and your gut and
but the thing about
higher
discernment
self versus your five sensory,
Right, but discernment in my opinion can still mislead you guys, or mislead us, meaning people. For example, I have a friend who was really into a certain guru back in India, and she was she had a little shrine built to this guy in her place, and he looked like your typical cliche Indian guru, long beard, in a Jesus robe, sitting in that yoga pose. And she was telling me about how he's 170 years old and stuff like that. And I'm like, okay, whatever. And she was loving this guy and into everything that he had to say when it comes to what he was doing online. And then about a couple years later, it was the little shrine she had was gone. And I'm like, I actually asked her, and she really was I could see a certain agony in her eyes when she was telling me. She's like, no, that guy was not good. It was not good. There was a lot of ways he misled a lot of us, and that's all she said. And it was I could tell it's such a personal thing that I didn't even want to prod any farther. But oh well, see, I mean, I could have told you that a couple years ago when you told me about how he's 170 some odd years old, but whatever. And then I mean that would not have been the good comment back. But my point is there's another guru or somebody that kind of goes down, if you will.
Yeah, but you have to, it's like you said in the beginning, discernment is a muscle, and it doesn't get stronger the longer you live. It gets stronger the more you use it and you work it. So if, she was starting to learn her own internal discernment, and everyone's got to start somewhere. And so, yeah, she came up against someone who was deceiving everyone and trying to present in a way that, seemed all holy in that. And when you dig a little bit further below the surface, you realize that this isn't exactly what's being portrayed on the outside, and that there's some hidden agendas underneath there. And then that's with anything. So like your discernment has to come from experience, and you have to constantly be exercising it. And you're not always going to get it right, but that's how you learn. That's how you learn that, okay, that's how I was feeling in this way. It wasn't right, but this is how I felt in this way, and it was right. And you start to understand that certain feelings are going to start to...
Isn't discernment just like another name for wisdom then eventually? Is that what you're kind of pretty much talking about? Because
no.
Discernment to me, from what I understood, was more like you're trying to use some sort of inner gut feeling on if it's true or not. Is there something more to that, or?
Yeah. It's like a GPS. It's like a GPS of truth.
So that's it, to me, interchangeable with like wisdom. I mean, wisdom can help if you want to look at wisdom being different, wisdom guides your discernment.
Yeah, wisdom's more of just the brain. Like wisdom is, more of a 5 sensory type thing, I think.
I'm
where
discernment with you.
Drags in your gut, your higher self.
Wisdom is an all-knowing feeling. Like wisdom is from that just internal knowing within you of what is truth, where information or knowledge is from learning information, but wisdom is from that deeper sense of knowing, where it's like you said, discernment is like using your wisdom to help you make decisions.
All right.
But there's more to it. There's more to it than just that. Like, I really feel that when you start to tune in more to energy, because that's what we're all made up of, everything in this world around us is made up of energy, you start to tune into the frequencies of energy and what feels good and what doesn't feel good. And truth will always resonate at a higher frequency than untruth or non-truth. And so it's when you start to feel certain, like you start to pay attention to how you feel on that frequency of energy, that's another layer in your discernment box.
And wisdom is within discernment. Mm-hmm. I mean.
All right, so we'll talk about vibrations and things like that. I don't know, different show, I'd imagine, but like that's just like it's a weird thing for me to really understand, because I know I'm going back to the metaphysics of my early schooling. I know that like even pretty much everything vibrates if you look at it that way. But like, how do you know if a vibration is good just because it's true versus not? I mean, that's a serious like what am I trying to say? Serious allegation as far as like this is what happens when you say the truth or you hear something true. It's like it vibrates at a certain frequency. It's like, how do you know that?
Because it's just like Nicole said, it's trial and error. You have to exercise that muscle. You have to practice that. You learn. Everybody's different in how they feel things. So sometimes like you're dating. Think of dating, Michael. Okay, so you're dating and you learn discernment over dating. Like you learn to kind of pick up signals or, feelings that you have, like, or even with friendships. Like some people aren't, always honest, and they maybe want to be friends for you for.
Yeah, but like sometimes you're pleasantly surprised that your early feelings were completely wrong.
Yeah, but that can also be played in from your ego and natural judgments that you're quick to make because of past experiences.
That's the hard part, really, is that I think that we could talk about is that the ego and how the ego really everything gets intertwined, especially when you're new to spirituality and you're new to listening to your higher self and learning, what that feels like. It's very easy for the ego to get in there. And oftentimes, even yesterday I had just a situation where I was trying to make a decision on whether to do something or not. And I couldn't quite decide whether it was my ego talking or, that discernment piece, that my higher self. And I just really had to take time to sometimes you just have to take time to kind of sit with it and figure out, like, is this my ego because of other things that I've heard? Maybe people have told me about, this situation or this person, or is it really, a gut feeling that I have? So it's not something that's necessarily easy. And like Nicole said, you have to practice it, and you're not always going to get it right. Just because you're on this path doesn't mean you suddenly everything's perfect and you have perfect discernment all the time. You're never going to make mistakes. You're always going to, read people correctly. That's not going to happen. But hopefully you'll get better at it.
Yeah,
as
hopefully.
Time goes on. Yeah. I mean, as you focus on it and you think about it, maybe that's, we haven't really talked about.
I don't feel like I have gotten better at judging people, to be honest with you, but maybe that's just my own thing. Like, after 30 some odd years on this world, it's like, I feel like I actually believe less in people that I initially meet. Like, I really, unfortunately, and then maybe it's just my perception or whatever the ego thing is that you guys talk about. It's just, I just don't like take dating, for example. I hate dating. We talked about this many times. I just have this kind of this mistrust of the idea of dating. It's like I would rather just know a girl for 2 or 3 years before I would consider her date to go dating with her, if you will. Just mainly because probably of my past experiences, but I just feel like I've gotten more. I don't want to use the word negative. More just I don't believe in a lot of people as when I meet them.
That's
Does that make sense?
because you've built very large walls up around yourself.
Yeah, maybe.
And discernment isn't judgment. I mean, it isn't about becoming more judgmental. It's about becoming more.
That's
open.
what I'm trying to avoid.
The problem is the ego, and the ego brings in all this judgment. So if you're bringing that all in when you meet somebody, and you're trying to figure it out, then you're using the ego, and now you're screwed because the ego is going to fuck it up every time.
Yeah,
so
that's a very good point, Lisa.
Yeah, you need to try to get.
And that's what I'm trying to work on in my, even beyond this show. That's really what I'm trying to work on interpersonally, because I think with what happened to me earlier in my life, I'm I just killed, as you said, Nicole, put up a huge wall of trust when it comes to not just girls, but people in general. And that is something I'm trying to figure out how to break down.
Yeah, because you're protecting yourself. We all do that.
Yeah.
Especially, for example, with your friend and the guru, the 170-year-old guy. I mean, we have a choice at that point when something like that happens to us. We can put up this wall, and now we just don't trust anybody, Or we can just say, hey, I learned something here. Maybe we learn to look into people's eyes better and see, is there light in their eyes or not? Because that's a telltale sign. Or, maybe we learn, is this all about them? Are they promoting themselves? But if we walk away from that situation with just now a judgment, okay, I don't trust anybody who says this or this now, that's not helping. We have to leave that sort of in the past and not bring a judgment.
Yeah, so that's okay. So let's talk about the spiritual guru thing a little bit, because that's a big topic. And I think, for your girlfriend who was in that situation, I'm sure there were certain points.
A friend that was a girl.
Yeah, so that's what I meant. Sorry. We'll clear that one up. But I think for her, there must have been some times along the way where she may have got inklings of feelings well, that just doesn't feel right to me. And if she didn't, I'm going to bet the whole like house on this is that because she was so much in her worship mode of this guy, she completely blinded herself to all clues and hints that were coming her way. And that's where I think we talked about that in the first episode about this whole idea of worship and how it's really detrimental to your evolution, your spiritual evolution, your growth as an individual, because you're putting so much of your own power into someone else as opposed to retaining it for yourself and expanding it from within and using them just as a guide. And that's where I think, when people start to walk this path of spirituality, it's a fine line of finding some mentors and guides to help you, but also know that ultimately you make the final decision. You decide for yourself what's true and what's not. You don't just believe something else because someone else is saying it. And that goes out to all our listeners. Like, don't believe us just because we're saying it. Question everything. Question everything you hear. And use your own discernment by going say, okay, did it feel right? If it didn't, why didn't it feel right? What was it about it that didn't feel right? Was it a certain word? Was it the tone that was said around it? There's a lot of different ways that you can pick up on it. And I think that's what's, there's like things that you guys say that, like, to me right now just doesn't feel right. Like what?
And it has more to do with just like things that I'd known from my past, even like just schooling and stuff like that. Not anything that you guys have brought up so far on the show, but like I'm sure it'll come down in future shows. But like I'm not gonna buy this one. Either you're gonna have to, like I always tell you, Nicole, like you're gonna have to convince me on this.
But no. But Michael, your truth isn't. Everybody's truth is different.
No,
and
I know.
I
truly believe
place.
That, yeah.
And everybody's on a different place in their path as well. So what might be good for one maybe just isn't good for another at that time. And you just might not be ready for it. So it doesn't mean like something something comes at Nicole and I, we might be ready for that, and we might be ready to accept that and move on to that. And so it feels right to us. But when you hear that same thing, it doesn't feel right to you. Maybe you're just not ready for that.
Maybe I'm not ready, or maybe that's just really, I don't know. This is where it gets weird because we might be competing on who's right versus who's wrong versus.
It's not about that.
It's not about that.
That's what I'm saying. Versus it's not about anything. You guys might believe what you guys believe till the end of your life, and I might believe what I believe. So.
Like when I was visiting you in May, and you were saying to me, Nicole, I'm reading some of these articles that you sent me, and some of them they're just not resonating with me, but I'm finding like I'm really resonating with like you were saying, like the chakras and all that, like you wanted to learn more about that. And I said to you, then go with that, like follow that, because there's a reason why you're being pulled towards it and not some of the other stuff that I've sent you. It doesn't mean that what I've sent you is right or wrong. It just means it's not resonating with you. And there's a reason for that, because we all have our own strengths and our own gifts on how we're going to relay our message. And that where you resonate the most is where you should be looking into. And it's not about right or wrong. It's what's true for you.
Right.
It's the same. It's really very simple. It's just the same as what we're used to, as far as like, does science resonate with you, or are you more of an art person, or, what? It's your own truth, your own inner guide of what you're being directed to do. And not everybody's clearly directed to do the same thing, or we'd all just be robots, right? And we're not all supposed to just walk around believing and feeling the same thing.
God, no. That would be so
freaking
the same
boring. With spirituality, it's not a religion. It's like I said, I think in our first show that, we talked about what does spirituality mean to you. And it's about that relationship going inside, going deep within you and finding your own truth. It's not about anybody else's. And just because it's right for your neighbor or they, feel good about it, doesn't make it right for you. And that's okay.
Yeah. And I think that's where a lot of people get tripped up on truth, is that everyone believes that there's can only be one truth, and yeah, there are universal truths. But, where you are consciously on your own journey, your truths are going to they're going to vary differently, very much so, from other people depending on where they are at consciously. And it's just, as you're growing, what's true for you, and you have to honor it. And I think we're all connected as one, but we're also individuals celebrating our own individuality. And I think we can't get lost in that. So it's not about all becoming one personality or one belief. It's about uniting together through love and through peace, but also celebrating our own individuality and our beliefs. Yeah.
I can't say that. I'm just going to say that that'll be my comment on everything. Just no judgment. Just like we don't realize how much we judge everything and each other so much all the time. And just, I think the most important thing is just really letting go of that judgment. Just let things be. Just let them be as they are. They don't have to be. We're so used to we were taught from such a young age to label everything as good or bad or right or wrong. And it doesn't have to be either one of those things, any of those. It can just be what it is. And I think that's just really important to understand. If your friend is into some guru and she's really into it and you're not, and you feel wrong about it, celebrate whatever it is that she's feeling and embrace that. You don't.
Yeah, no, I mean, even at the time, I didn't care. I was like, okay, you're still my friend. I'm not gonna, cast you to the side. But like, I just like, okay, whatever floats your, as we say, whatever floats your boat.
Yeah, and I didn't mean it as a direct, like that you were saying.
But like, I hear what you guys are saying, and the non-judgmental is that you got to exercise in your mind as well, like along with discernment. That's for sure. Yeah,
I always say be the witness. Just be the witness. Just observe. Just observe without any judgment.
This is going to sound kind of silly, but a great exercise, to kind of, if you're new to spirituality, whatever, and this is.
And that's another thing. I don't even look at what we're talking about so much as spirituality. It's more like as trying to be a good person. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, you don't even have to label it so much as like spirituality when you're trying to like not judge or lose the ego, things like that. I mean,
if you're new to trying to lose the ego is what I should say.
Right, exactly.
So if you're new to that, one of the things that I started doing, and this may resonate with some and not others, but I like to drive, and we all drive, right? We're all out in traffic, and traffic's getting, worse and worse all around, the country all the time. And, road rage is a problem and all that. And I used to be kind of an aggressive driver where things would upset me. Bad drivers would upset me, not using turn signals or being in the fast lane and going slow or, whatever it may be. And I just, in this journey of personal development and losing the ego that I've been on, I decided that I just was going to let go of judging when I was driving and just see everything more as just, it is what it is. Like, oh, wow, that's fascinating. Look, there's a person going, 45 in the left, on the highway in the left lane, and I just decided not to judge anybody anymore for their driving and just let everything be. And I can't even tell you, it just became like miraculous. I love driving now more than I did before because I'm not stressed at all. And I'm just like totally relaxed. And I just think it's a good exercise if you want to practice it, because it's something that we do every day in learning to let go of judgment. Just thought.
No, I actually like that. And for the listening audience, I've driven with Lisa, and yes, she likes to drive.
What does that mean? Am I good at it?
I'm just saying, you like to.
I think we all have a heavy foot.
Actually, all three of us, and which is rare. I've driven with a lot of women in my life, but you two, wow, you guys know how to drive. That's for sure. So good for you.
I like to get where I'm needing to go. I like to get there. So.
But also, Nicole, when you were with me and I was driving, I'm like, I'm not scaring you, and you're like, no, I'm completely fine. I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
I trust
We're
you.
supposed to be friends.
Yeah.
I don't get scared unless the person I'm with isn't a good driver. Then I get scared. But if I know that they're a good driver, I don't care.
Oh gosh.
Of course, you guys believe like, oh, if an accident happens, I got another life waiting for me.
Exactly.
I'll just come right back in, jump the line.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, we could, I could just become a walk-in. We could start with that.
Oh gosh, let's not even talk about walk-ins yet.
Yeah.
I just thought I'd throw that out there for our listeners.
Let's not lose all 3 of our people that are listening to the show.
Walk-ins? What the hell are they talking about?
That'll be like 100th episode down the road or something.
Walk-ins, aka body snatching.
Okay, all right.
This is where Michael starts calling us kooks.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah. We'll get there.
All right. Let's get back on track here. So, Michael,
tell me about. Can I ask you a question, Nicole?
Yeah, sure.
Tell me about your experience with yoga, and just some of the men in yoga, and your experience and your thoughts on that.
The men in yoga?
The dirty yoga men.
Yoga was brought here by men. Like, women were kept out of yoga.
Yeah, you're right. I didn't have, my experience, I haven't had any negative male experience or experience with men in yoga personally. I've had so my spiritual path, as I mentioned before, started when I was 17, and I was being told to try yoga very soon after that because I was super inflexible. Like, I mean, my body probably was so brittle, like it could break if I tried to bend over in half. Like, it was so inflexible. And I was really embarrassed.
Your book, Inflexible Me.
Yeah, it's where
our
my
listeners
book came
don't
from.
know. She wrote a book.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's what spawned the book. And but there was something about yoga that was just really turning me off. Like, aside from the fact that I just didn't want to expose my inflexibility to an entire room filled with very bendable bodies, I also was just turned off by something about it. Like, it just had a level of falsehood to it that I couldn't put my finger on because I hadn't really gone to a yoga class yet, but I just didn't resonate with it. And when I finally decided to go to a yoga class, I then found out why. I remember standing in the waiting area waiting for the class before us to finish, and as I did, more and more people are starting to come in, waiting around, and there's some girls just looking you up and down, checking you out, just in a judgmental way. And when we got into the class, the teacher just spoke from, it didn't feel very compassionate. It felt kind of very militant. It didn't feel like anything I had heard yoga to be. Like, yoga was kind of advertised as this blissful feeling that you get, or activity that you could engage in to bring about bliss. And I didn't feel any of that in my first yoga class. It was just really militant. And so I decided I hated yoga after that. Like, I just knew I hated yoga. Well, I later realized, like, I hated the way yoga made me feel. It wasn't so much that I hated yoga. But, even after I found yoga again and I fell in love with it this time, because I actually found a teacher who was completely compassionate to my lack of flexibility, and helped me kind of find a way to nurture myself in yoga and appreciate my body for where it was in the journey. I still encounter a lot of ego in different yoga studios, and that really turns me off of the whole yoga industry. And it's why I don't really go to yoga studios. I just do my own practice. Like, I ended up getting my own teacher's training, so I can just do yoga whenever I want. Like, even just this year alone, just a few months ago when I was in Denver, girlfriends and I went to a yoga studio. I won't say which one, but the teacher she was going on this, she was trying to teach the compassionate part of yoga and how we shouldn't be judging ourselves. And she kept talking about it and talking about it. And then what does she do? She comes and judges me and my girlfriend for how we were doing our yoga poses. And she called us out in front of the entire class. She's like, where do you guys practice yoga? I can't believe this. And she started like trying to shift our bodies into different positions, never asking us if we had any injuries, not realizing that my girlfriend had an injury that she was nursing and couldn't get into certain poses. Didn't realize that the pose that I was in, I was also nursing a very chronic injury from a long time ago, and just completely called us out in front of the entire class. And it angered me so much because, you know, people in that class, and I knew some of them, were thinking she's this wonderful teacher. And that's not right. Like, that's not how you teach people to be judgmental of their bodies and think that they're doing something wrong just because their body can't get into a certain position. And there just seems to be a lack of compassion. Like, you look on social media and all you see are these people in these perfect yoga poses, and people have this idea like that's what yoga is, and it's really not. It's such a small part of yoga, and when yoga is really about self-appreciation, self-acceptance, the flexibility of the mind more so than the body. And it's just, when you have a teacher that you look up to and you see them treating students that way, it's the first time they've ever been to your class, red flags should be going up. And so that's one of my biggest gripes with the yoga industry, is that, you know, and it's not all, because it's definitely not all. I've come across some fantastic teachers who just, you know, like melt my heart. Like, they just really speak from a place of compassion and teach from that place of compassion, and honor you for where you are in your journey, and honor your body for where it is. But for a lot of other yoga instructors or even students who maybe were born with very flexible bodies and don't understand the journey of the very inflexible person to try and engage in a yoga practice, it requires so much compassion, so much self-love to move through it so that you can engage your body fully in whatever way that it's practicing. So
I think people go to yoga, you know, to find that self-acceptance because they hear that about it. And, you know, then when they have an experience like you had, and I've seen it myself in yoga classes, where you feel like you're being judged and everyone around you is judging you, you know, then you just don't want to do it anymore. And maybe, you know, you're not strong enough, or, you know, to continue to just maybe look for a better teacher or do it yourself at home or whatever it is. And I think it's the same way with, you know, just the whole topic that we're talking about today. Just, it's about the teacher, you know, are they bringing ego into it? Or are they bringing spirit into their practice, whatever it may be, whether it's yoga or Reiki or, you know, any other type of
anything in life. There's a lot of bad teachers in every section of life, in my opinion. Like, I remember going to college going, this is a waste of money, because these guys, they're called teachers, but they don't know how to teach anything.
Yeah, just because you have the knowledge doesn't mean you're necessarily the best teacher for it.
That's
and, you know,
right.
we just went full circle back to exactly what we were talking about before. You know, it's in, you know, frauds are in every industry, you know, bad teachers are in every industry. And it, again, just goes right back to discernment, but it also goes back to trusting yourself. Like, you have to have faith in yourself. So if you go to a yoga class and, you know, you expect to be treated with compassion and you're not, don't discount all of yoga, you know, just, you know, keep in mind that maybe it was just that teacher, you know. And it's the same way with, we talked about in the first episode, with like religion and just anything that you do. Just because you have someone that is bringing the ego into it, that's your red flag. You know, the red flag is if they're working from their ego, then you probably need to find another
Yeah,
another teacher or another mentor or another salesperson or another doctor or another whatever it is, you know?
Mm-hmm. That's the first thing that's my first a tool that I use in discernment is this coming from ego? And you know if it's coming from ego or not by the words that they're using. Are they judgmental words? Are they more loving words? Is this about exclusivity or is this inclusive? Is this based out of fear or is this based out of love? Like, these are a lot of the questions that I ask myself when I'm reading articles, when I'm listening to the news, when I'm like, you know, anything where I'm trying to discern truth from, which feels right. You know, those are like some of my big points that I gravitate to first to help me understand if this is true or not for me.
And, you know, I don't know if we're getting ahead of maybe some of our listeners as far as speaking about the ego, because I think, you know, I talked about the Course in Miracles, and that's kind of how I started this journey. And that was one of the most enlightening things about the Course in Miracles was learning about the ego and that I even had one. Like, I didn't really even know what that was. So, Nicole, I'm going to ask you to talk about that a little bit because you're good at that stuff. But just describing like who is the ego, and like some people may not even realize that there's a difference, you know, between using your ego and using your higher self, and what does that mean?
Well, I'll be very honest. I'm actually quite interested to know what Michael's definition of the ego is and how he puts a character to it, because I love how he puts characters to everything. But
we always grown up. I don't even know how to say it. With the ideas like when we ever hear the word ego, it usually is associated with, oh, that person's got a big ego. But you guys made me think of like actually what that is. What is a big ego? And
just what's an ego? What's a small ego? What's an ego?
That's my point. Is like, if he's got a big ego, do we have a small ego? And like, what is ego? But we just kind of like use it as a turn of phrase nowadays. But, you know, big ego or ego is like what we thought back in the day of like, oh, that person thinks they're better than other people, which kind of correlates to what you guys are talking about when it comes to ego. It's not that he's better than other people, it's that we perceive that person is judging other people. And we just never really thought it through. Most people just never really thought it through, in my opinion. Keep your ego in check. And there's another phrase that we commonly use, meaning like stay humble. You know, those are that's where I think the majority of the audience, or at least the way I have grown up, is ego is a bad thing. And a bad thing meaning it's like usually you're cocky or you're overly confident. That's the way that we learned what ego was growing up.
Well,
so you guys have explained not a completely different definition, it's just a different version of that definition with ego. And really, from what I've understood from the both of you, is ego is when you use judgment to make decisions or to make assumptions, and which is usually not the best thing in the world.
Ego to me is what I've learned, what I understand it to be, is our separated self. We're all one. You know, we're all connected. We talked about this, you know, there's one Son of God and we are it. But we think that we're separate. So we've devised this ego part of us that believes that we're separate from everybody else. So I believe, you know, I'm 5'11", I'm a woman with, you know, dark hair and, you know, a certain amount of intelligence, or, you know, from America. You know, I believe I am who I am, and then I'm this separate person. And I use that to stay separate from other people. And then we use that ego to judge. That ego is very judgmental because it's trying to remain separate and believe that it's separate. So it's once you get the ego out of the way, then you can start to really connect with people, because you're not focusing on your differences, you're focusing on your oneness. And in can come compassion. So with ego comes an immediate judgment. With ego comes fear. But when you get the ego out of the way, there's no more fear, there's no more judgment, and you will allow this oneness to occur between you and others.
Yeah, the ego is the source of separation. So anytime that you're pointing the finger at someone else, where you're comparing yourself against someone else, where you're basically doing anything that separates you from that, that's ego. Whereas, for instance, someone said something to you and it's hurt you. And you just look at that person and you say, you're such a mean person. You can say that from ego, or, from the part that's actually connected to that person and realizing that you're one with that person, and that, by them saying that to you, they're actually hurting themselves. You say, wow, why are you saying that? Like, what pain is within you that you feel the need to say that to me? And so you start to look at them with more compassion and say, oh, something must have been going on or might have happened that caused that person to project that out to me. And so that's when you're no longer operating from ego. You're now operating from the heart space of that, and the compassion that you realize, well, I don't want that person to be hurting, because now they're trying to hurt me. And in doing so, they're actually hurting themselves. So you can either break the cycle, which can easily become a vicious cycle, or you can continue it. And so that's where you can let
your ego.
Yeah, you can allow your ego to engage and continue the cycle. So that's kind of how I look at it.
And I think that's how we have to be in check always with our ego. I think that's really important to, I think on a daily basis, that's my intention, is to not come from my ego today. Whether it's, I'm going to practice at driving. I'm not going to judge other drivers and, I'm a better driver than you. And, oh my gosh, look at that little old lady, or, oh, that guy doesn't know how to drive, or, whatever. I'm not going to judge. So I'm just not going to come from a place of my ego. We're all just out here doing the best that we can do, no matter what it is. You're in there's so many places every day to practice, paying attention to your ego, stepping outside of yourself and watching yourself and how you react to people and what thoughts are going through your mind when you're in a crowd and people watching. Are you judging? Or when people are being slow in the grocery line and a woman pulls out a check or something and starts, writing a check, and you're like, oh my, what the hell? And just not judging people. And I think that's just a great way to just every day just say, I'm just going to watch myself today, and I'm going to watch how much my ego wants to get involved with absolutely everything, and just observe yourself and start to learn what it means to be coming from your ego. Because once you learn it about yourself, you'll start to see it in other people, and then you can be like Nicole said, where you start being compassionate, where if someone's yelling at you or is being rude to you, you, instead of getting angry or coming from your ego or getting defensive, you start hearing them crying for help. You start hearing that their heart is hurting, or that they're coming from a place of fear, and you suddenly just have more compassion. It doesn't mean you're going to let people walk all over you now. It just means that you're going to be more aware of where that person's really coming from.
Yeah. What about you, Michael? I know you got some points about all of this that you wanted to touch on. Did you touch on all of them, or is there anything that we've missed?
Oh no, I mean, if we go back to our initial, what has made me, and I don't want to use the word less spiritual, but turned off by spirituality, or just the spiritual things. I mean, I could go. I think if always imagine if I had a child, what I would do differently. And like one of the first things I would do differently is not like start them off with lies when they're kids. What do I mean by that? And this is a simple example, and we all can probably relate to this. But like even like the idea of Santa Claus, something like, or the Tooth Fairy, things like that. I truly believed in these things when I was a kid, truly. And then they just start chipping away. Like, oh, that's not true. Just found Santa Claus presents in my mom's closet 2 weeks before Christmas. How does that work? Things start to chip away, and I'm like, then you realize you can't believe everything, which is probably a good thing as a child learning to learn, but it can go too far in your life. Like you just start not believing anything. And even like when the Bible, like everybody like wants you to, or a lot of Christians or whatever want you to revert to the Bible. Like the Bible will tell you answers, but like the Bible can be very convoluting in itself as well. Like I really truly don't believe that Noah's Ark ever happened. And if it did, it was in a small little version of the world where, yeah, there might have been flooding, but the whole world wasn't covered in water, and and only 2 of every animal was on this boat, and that's how everything came to be now. Like, just those little things makes me want to not believe the rest of the Bible. Does that make sense? Like,
yeah, well, I think
it's not that I don't believe the rest of the Bible. It's just like you just start chipping away. Well, if that's not true, how can I believe anything else?
But there might be truths within all of those stories, but they've been muddled. They've been muddled by humans to tell their version of it. So
well, I can understand that, but like they always say, how does the devil work? Well, he throws a little truth into the lies, and sometimes I feel like that's how very strong manipulators work, how psychopaths work. I mean, this is just like all goes hand in hand. Add a little truth to it, sprinkle a little bit of truth, but it's one giant lie at the end of the day. And that's what makes me turned off by a lot of the things that I hear when people talk about spirituality. Cliches that I see online about how you can just, be like even you two sometimes speak not in cliches, but like when you say quickly, oh, you just got to be within your higher self or your oneness or things like that, that resonates nothing to me. And maybe it's because I still need to learn more. Maybe it's because I need to understand what you guys are talking about more.
No, I agree with you there. I would totally agree with you there. It means nothing to say just be with your oneness or to just love yourself. I completely agree with you.
I've been with my oneness for quite a while. Nothing. it's we get kind of bored together.
No, okay. So yeah, like you touch on a really good thing there. And you and I have had this conversation about when people just tell you, well, you just need to love yourself. What fuck does that even mean? Like people don't even know what loving themselves even mean because no one actually even understands what real love is on this planet. It's been so tainted to think that it includes pain, that it includes suffering, that it means that
sacrifice.
Sacrifice, that you own someone, that you're someone's property. Like it's just, there's so much crap that got thrown into this idea of love that now like people don't even know what love is anymore. So when you go to actually love yourself, are you even really loving yourself? Is it actually an act of love? Because on the basis of what we've been taught love is, no, it's not. Like for instance, I used to think that I was totally loving myself back in my 20s when I was working out 5 to 7 days a week after I would just do 8 hours of massage. I was thinking, well, I'm just being healthy. I'm making sure that I'm physically active and all that. And yes, to some degree, but I was pushing myself so much and never taking the time to do yoga at that point in my life where I was nurturing my body. And so it actually wasn't an act of love. I was demanding and demanding and demanding of my body and never giving back to it. So I was constantly in this take mode. And that's an example of how I thought I was loving myself, but I really wasn't. To some degree, it could have been if it had been more balanced. But, there's so many things that, we're out there thinking, well, maybe this is an act of self-love. But the hard part comes, what is love?
I think we could do a whole show on unconditional love. I think that's a great topic because I have lots to say about that.
So, it makes my back go up when I hear someone say to someone else, you just need to love yourself. It means nothing to people. They don't even know what it means.
Well, even now, in my opinion, the word love or I love you or whatever means nothing. It means nothing. Like down here in Florida where I live, the culture is like pretty much, even I do it. I abuse it myself. It's like if you've known a person and you like a person, you're like, oh, love you. And it's just like it loses its meaning in a way.
The English language is, we have so few words truly for things, and love is such an ambiguous word. I mean, we use it for, passionate love. We use it for, the way loving friends or, I mean, there's I know there are other languages that have numerous words for the word love, and we just have one. So what does it really mean?
Nothing.
I can see that totally, and then even in
the Spanish culture,
you that one rubs me the wrong way too, because
I'm in love with you. Is that what you said?
A lot, I know you love me, but are you in love with me?
Oh,
that just is like takes a knife and stabs in a nerve.
Start of a bad romantic comedy.
I don't know. To me, it's like, do you mean do I lust you? Do I want to have sex with you? What's the difference between love and being in love? And what does all that mean? I think it's all bullshit.
Love is bullshit.
Well, the version that
we're talking the same language now.
Yeah, it's the old version of love that everyone's understanding to be is bullshit. But what love actually is, and we can do a whole podcast on that.
Yes, I think we should.
Yeah, is completely different. So
yes,
let's save that for upcoming episodes.
The ego, I guess it's just, I'm going to say that it's about the ego. So it's the ego, whenever the ego gets a hold of something, it fucks it up. And it gets a hold of the word love, and it just wants to bring all these rules into it and all these things that separate us.
Yes.
So we'll talk about that later.
Yeah. Anything else there, Michael, you got on that list before we wrap this up?
My own spirituality in my own personal life, and this is something that's very hard for me. It's easy for me to admit to you guys, and I've told you guys in the past. I lost most of my faith when my marriage dissolved, or when I ended up getting a divorce that I did not want. And I remember sitting in church after I was divorced and looking around, and this is Catholic church, and because I still liked the idea of trying to figure out a way to be more spiritual, and my only direction in my life that I learned when I was young was through Catholicism. But I remember just sitting in church after I was divorced and by myself, looking around, hearing the priests mumble some words, and priests and religious leaders there's some good ones, and there's some that are whatever, and then there's some real bad ones, which can really speak bad to a lot of religions and things like that. But I was just, nothing was resonating with me. Looking around, seeing all these happy little families running around with their little kids that they're going to, continue to indoctrinate or whatever. And it just turned me off completely. I was just at my lowest point, probably in my depression that I was going through. And I was so frustrated. I was so frustrated with people telling me that, just pray and you'll be fine, or pray and things will, magically happen. Prayer is one of the most misleading misdirections, in my opinion, to spirituality. We if prayer works, nobody knows how to teach prayer then. Or if prayer really means something to some people, I look at it as like, okay, the reason why prayer might mean something to you is the same way why mantra works for those people. Like, it's just some sort of repetitious way of speaking that somehow calms you down or makes you feel better. But I mean, I feel like the idea of when I grown up, I gotta figure out how to say that properly. When people tell you just to pray on things, the only thing that ever resonated to me was pray on the discernment, like you guys are talking about. But other than that, you're not going to be sitting there asking for God to do this, asking for God to do that.
Okay, so where prayer gets all.
But that's my point. Is like, it's like that's where it's lost. That's where it's completely beat up. And it's not just the Catholic Church. And it's like, if something bad happens to you, and everybody online tells you to keep you in your prayers or keep that person in their prayers, I just roll my eyes. Like, I don't think.
Okay. Let me address this. Let me address this, because this is a big thing.
Before you address it, I'm trying to tell you that prayer in the church, going to church, that whole thing. It might have been my lowest side of my depression, but like, it just completely turned me up to spirituality. So that's my main number one thing.
Okay, so with prayer is taught to us to do for an expected outcome that we hope for. And that's where everything goes wrong, because the outcome that's going to come needs to be of the highest good for those involved. And whatever that may be, may not be the outcome that we're hoping for. And so prayer should really be about sending love to, whether it's yourself or other individuals, and it's just sending them love to assist in them being able to move through whatever it is that they're moving through, and that it's going to be, the outcome is going to be of the highest good. And that's really what I believe prayer should be. We get attached to this idea of outcome, that if we just pray hard enough, then everything's going to turn out magically well.
Oh God, I can't stand that.
Yeah, and that's where everything kind of goes sideways, is that we believe that we know what's best. And the reality is we have like maybe an inkling idea of what could be best. And, it's just this idea of attachment that really kind of screws it all up. But
it also can really be very damaging. I mean, it's like, okay, I prayed, it didn't work. So therefore,
but that's the thing. You have to be able to send the love without any attachment to the outcome. That's unconditional love.
Yeah,
sending love.
Again, that's something like for a future.
Yeah, but that's what prayer actually is. Prayer is sending love. It's not about sending hope for a specific outcome. It's sending love with no conditions attached to it. And that means no conditions on the outcome that you're hoping to see, or the outcome that you think that person should have, or vice versa. It's just about sending love, and nothing else is attached to it.
And when you're praying for yourself, when you're praying for, praying to have your broken heart healed or whatever it may be, it doesn't mean you're magically going to wake up tomorrow morning and you're just going to feel great. But you're asking for guidance, and that guidance may be something that just never even, or, the outcome of that guidance, something that never crossed your mind. It may be that maybe you run into someone that day who makes you smile or something, and lifted your heart just a little bit. And maybe that was the answer to your prayer, that, you had a smile put on your face today.
Well, I don't know if that just chalks up to random circumstances and healing and things like that you naturally do with time. I wouldn't necessarily chalk that up to, oh, my prayers were answered or my prayers worked. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but the reality is because we have free will, we have to ask for what it is that we want. We're not just, nothing is forced upon us. So if you want something, or you want help with something, it's as simple as just asking, and that's what prayer really is. Prayer is just a conversation. Like, I just think of prayer as a conversation with God. You're not asking him necessarily to do anything for you. Maybe you're asking for help, but you're also just having a conversation with him. And that's prayer. To me, prayer is simply, it's a conversation. It's a conversation with the higher realm. It's getting out of the ego, and it's I know you don't believe in any of that I'm talking about, so I'm not helping you. But
yeah. But I just am turned off by the idea. And if you go back even online or if people, it starts to irritate me when people said that to me a lot when I was going through with what I went through. Because it's just such a cliche thing to say to people.
No,
it's
I
like
get
when
it.
it's like if you just take the equivalent online, like when a disaster happens, all of a sudden people turn their background into whatever the flag is of where the disaster happened. I'm like, okay, thanks for nothing. That does nothing to anything, and that's the way I feel like with prayer.
Well, and I think also what turned you off is that, you weren't just being allowed to grieve. Like, you weren't being allowed to just like feel like shit and be okay with it. They're like, well, just pray and it'll all be better. Well, why does it need to be better right now? Why can't you just feel like shit and move through those emotions and allow yourself to feel it and allow yourself to just talk about it with people? Like, that's sometimes where someone's like, well, everything happens for a reason. That's another cliche that people hate. Myself, I kind of hear it a little too often too. And it's like, well, that doesn't really make me feel better right now. So it's one of those things where communication is really broken down amongst everyone, and it's like you said, Lisa, we have so few words to really describe how we're feeling. So that's where I think a lot of the breakdown comes from.
Yeah, and I think that and when people do say that to us, again, it's about not judging them and understanding where their heart is coming from, even if they're not using the right words. And maybe that's the only thing they really know how to say. And it's just all in how you decide to perceive things too. If somebody says, oh, I'll pray for you, just say to yourself, every time I hear that, I'm just going to hear, I love you, because that's what they're saying. Yeah. They're just saying that their heart is with your heart and they want the best for you, and so again, it's just letting go of the judgment and the beliefs that we have attached to different things and hearing people's hearts and not necessarily just the words that come out of their mouth. I find that I don't know, I hardly really listen to what people are saying most of the time, and I try more to feel what it is that they're saying, because we do have so few words and we have so many beliefs and we have so many cliches, and we were taught to say so many things that most of the time people are speaking as if they're a robot, but I try to hear what it is that they're truly saying. I don't know if this is a topic for today and we're kind of wrapping it up, but I was married for 25 years. I never listened to a word my husband said because he never made any sense.
25 years of that.
Yeah, well, because he always was coming from a place of, he had, a lot of pain and a lot of hurt, and he expressed that through anger. And a lot of the time when he was like really angry about something or, saying certain things about other people or whatever, I never heard any of the words that he was saying. The only thing I ever would really allow, not ever, I won't say 100% of the time, but that I really tried to do was to hear what the pain that was coming from him, and when you start to listen to people, not just their words, but what it is that they're truly trying to express, then maybe they're just calling for help, like Nicole was saying in certain situations, that when people are angry or they're being rude to you, maybe they're just crying for help. That's what we need to hear. So don't get caught up on the words prayer, and I'll pray for you.
No, you guys asked me what turns me off on spirituality. Yeah. That's a big turn. And it's not like I'm getting caught up on it. It's not like I'm losing sleep over this. It's just that, it's just when I hear people are very spiritual, it loses its meaning, and to me, personally, because of just my past issues and things like that.
I completely understand that. I just think it's as far as that goes, an opportunity to again remind people that how much we judge, and how much we're, maybe looking for something from the outside for somebody to say, maybe the right words. But if we just open our heart, a lot of what is already coming our way, we're not truly hearing. We're not listening to it because we're expecting it to come in a particular type of package with a particular type of bow on it. And we're judging it so much that we don't really hear what it is that's coming across, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. I think that's good. I think for today's show, when it comes to deciphering, or discerning what's true and what's not true, it applies to all aspects of life, all aspects of communication. And I think the biggest lesson from what we've talked about today is discerning if you're coming from the ego or if you're coming from the heart. And, judgment is one of your biggest flags of letting you know that you're coming from ego. Or if it's coming from fear, anything that's separating you from anything else is the ego. And so when you're trying to discern your truth, those are some checklists to kind of go through on your own account, just in your own responsibility to your own journey and yourself and others around you of what's true and what's not true.
I think that's good advice. That's advice.
Well, this has been a good show. Michael, did you have anything else you wanted to add before we wrap it all up?
No, that's you want me to know what the frauds and what turns me off in spirituality? Told you. So we're good.
So do you feel like still exactly in the same place as you were before we talked about this, or is there anything else that makes a little bit more sense to you?
Exactly the same place, but it's not a bad place because just knowing you guys, I've come to better understanding. I mean, I'm really just doing this for the people on the things that turn me off. But one of the reasons why I like even hanging out with you two or talking to you two is because it shares a whole new different side of spirituality. Because I actually do crave it in my life. I want it, and I was just having a conversation with a friend of mine the other day. It's like you want to believe. You want to believe Santa Claus is true. You want to believe not that, but my point is there's something more beyond us just walking around and pissing each other off. But back in the day when I was in some of my darkest days, that's what turned me off.
Yeah.
And I got lost because of that.
Well,
if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But exactly the same. Did this help me? It's not that it helped me because I kind of knew a lot of your guys' opinions on this, but it's great for the show. What Nicole and Lisa have been saying has helped me. Meaning and I still need to learn, and I'm looking forward to the future podcast about the idea of love that you guys have. Because I have problems with that as well, but we'll get there.
Okay, well, I just
unconditional love.
Yeah,
Next
and you
topic.
said something that's actually I want to really touch on quickly because we're really running out of time here. We're going way over. But when you say I know a lot of the stuff that you guys are already talking about, that's something that a lot of people say when they're learning stuff, when they really realize that they don't know it on a cellular level yet. Know it in your mind, but you're not able to act it out in your life yet fully. And so it sometimes takes conversations like this to keep having it. It's not like it's hammering it into you, but to the point where one day all of a sudden it just sinks in, it anchors into your cells, and all of a sudden you really get it and you start living your life that way. So that's just an important thing to kind of
maybe not know. Maybe I've heard all the stuff you guys said before.
Yeah.
It's
all right.
It's starting to sink in.
Yeah.
Eventually,
all right.
I got a stubborn head.
All right, well, good show. So we'll wrap things up, and we will be back again next week with more. We don't know what our topic is going to be, but we'll discuss it, and we'll make it a surprise for next week. Sound good?
Sounds good to me.
All right, guys. We'll catch you later. Catch you next week. Bye.
Love you guys. Bye.
Thanks for joining us in this third episode of Spiritual Frauds, Discernment, and our good old friend, the ego. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe in iTunes and write us a review. This is what helps us stand out from the crowd and help people find a refreshing spin on spirituality with a great blend of credible advice and entertainment. And if you'd like to find out more about us, you can visit us at enlightenup.us. And if you want to learn more about your fabulous co-hosts who put their own spin on spirituality and enlighten it up, you can go to our website and hit the co-host button. If you haven't yet, you can follow us on social media. We are on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Have a great day, and we'll catch you next week for our 4th episode.